Well, wonderful, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I think that covers everyone that is joining us today. Congratulations, you are now halfway through our virtual retreat. I hope you're having a wonderful time listening to our presentations. My name is Neill. I am a new face in the lineup for Ancient Faith Writers and Presenters. Let me tell you a bit about myself before we dive into this segment. I live in North Carolina, where I work remotely as a website developer for an educational organization. My background is as a librarian and historian. I converted to the Orthodox faith 10 years ago, thanks in part to the ministry of Ancient Faith. I write for the blog The Brown Dress Project, which covers the lives of women saints and how women have been integral in the life of the church. My mission and passion is to help women from all areas of life experience to find belonging and connection within the Orthodox Church. No one is too weird to fit in with our collective story. As you can tell from the lives of all the saints that have come before us, everyone is uniquely fitted for their path in life. I was humbled and honored when Melinda asked me to join with the book project late last year. It has been a labor of love for all of us. What I want to share today is like a pep talk with a friend over coffee. I don't know about you, but I've had a lot of coffee today. My presentation is lo-fi. So if you need to move around while you listen, you need to stretch, you need to fold some laundry or bake some muffins, go right ahead. You won't miss much on the screen. I'm just going to have a few slides with quotes and a basic outline. And there will also be a few minutes at the end for questions or comments. So I will join you back in Zoom in order to hear those and respond to them. Now, Saint Nino, the saint that I was assigned, is a big saint. She was called an equal to the apostles, which is generally have been reserved for male saints who are missionaries to a country or a whole group of people. Her obedience to God as a young woman and the love she showed for people offers so much we can learn. I hope you will come away encouraged and fortified to go forth with your dreams. We will start off with a very simple question. Is this what you want? A few years ago, I was faced with a major life reset. I had been handed a clean slate from an unexpected divorce. I had no responsibilities tying me down, and I was in need of a new job and a new place to live. You don't get many of these opportunities. I was bewildered with making so many decisions just for myself. If you come from a similar background as a former Protestant Christian, there's a heavy emphasis on discerning God's will. Imagine that sort of pressure. What if I didn't discern correctly? What if I miss out? Am I being disobedient in choosing this apartment? Did I mess up beyond redemption because I chose this graduate school program? Believe me, the burden is real. I had been visiting friends in the Raleigh area of North Carolina. I had been driving down from my home at the time in Virginia. I really liked the Orthodox community there and the vibrancy of the city. Getting a job as an outsider is tough, and I didn't have the resources to move without an offer. One Saturday night, after Vespers, Father James at St. Raphael of Brooklyn Mission asked me the question above. It landed on me like a ton of bricks. Like, how does my wanting something matter? Wasn't I supposed to just submit myself to God's will and everything would be taken care of? So I thought about it for more than a few seconds, and then I replied meekly, yes. Then he said, we will pray that you get the opportunity to do that. That was my first intense lesson in learning what we call synergy in Orthodox theology. My desires are important in working with God towards my salvation and for the salvation of those around me. I have a will to exercise as informed with the Holy Spirit. As we turn towards God in prayer, like a flower towards the sunlight, we become more in tune with how God loves us and wants us to choose. So, where do our ideas come from? If you're anything like me, I have a constant fountain of ideas. Wouldn't it be nice if we did this? Or I could make that thing. More ideas than a dozen people could accomplish in a lifetime. It is like Pinterest was created just for me. What the glorious reality is that each one of us is different and uniquely created to be just where you are. We are a stew of all the experiences and education, life circumstances that we have encountered. Out of that stew, woo, bubbles up ideas. We are not all of those ideas are actionable. Part of middle age is learning to be wise with your energy and time, and I am constantly revising my expectations. But it's good to honor these ideas by writing them down at least and saving them. Some people journal and then never look back on your entries. I would suggest keeping a segment of a journal as your idea pages to capture them. Maybe an idea keeps popping up on a recurring basis and you find patterns over time. Something's not going to let you go. And then maybe you can share ideas with others. Perhaps they can adopt your random ideas like orphans and run with them on their own. Now we can begin to walk with St. Nino through her life story as we learn how to act on our ideas. I will give a brief recap for you if you haven't yet read her biography. Nino was born around 280 in Cappadocia, well before Constantine made Christianity the state religion of the Roman Empire. Her parents became monastics when she was only 12 years old, and she was left in the care of a governess of sorts who finished her education. In her late teens, Nino had a vision of in which the Theotokos called her to complete her missionary endeavor to Iberia or Georgia. The Theotokos had drawn lots with the apostles as they were setting out in their missionary journeys around the Mediterranean. She had received Georgia, but needed to stay in Jerusalem to serve the church near her original home, and she was brokenhearted about not being able to complete that missionary journey. In order to be prepared for so great an undertaking, the young Nino was trained up, though not exactly on purpose, from her caretaker or her parents, and all the right skills she needed to start, and what would carry through her calling in life. Asceticism, the A word, we're going to talk about it, how to handle suffering from external sources, and how to be patient during growth. We'll see how all these practices help bring ideas to reality. If you are new to the Orthodox Christian path, ascetic practices bring light to your particular blend of passions. Everyone has weaknesses in different spots. My husband has been a vegetarian for many years. In fact, it was one of the things that brought us together. He thought that our religion would be pretty easy to convert to since we love veggies too. Fasting from luxury food is already easy for him. Food is more of a struggle for me. As we are about to enter a fast, I have this keenly in mind as I set aside my favorite yogurt for a few weeks. Failure, though, is part of the process in being healed from your passions. The falling down, the getting up, the falling down, the getting up. Learning to live without helps you live abundantly wherever God takes you. Let me say that again. Learning to live without helps you live abundantly wherever God takes you. Stuff, physical and emotional baggage holds you down. Confession helps you let go. Isn't it a wonderful experience? That feeling of lightness after confession? We get a clean slate. We receive healing through confession in union with God through communion. The last point here is actually a common saying in the philosophy of Stoicism. Um, obstacles, obstacles are the way. Obstacles can be a physical infirmity of yourself or a loved one, external circumstances beyond your control, war, famine, plague, hello 2020, persecution, economic depression, and obstacles can be consequences of your past decisions that you have to live with today. What you do with those obstacles is your fast. Let me unpack that a little bit. I know that many people struggle with following the fasting rules because they have dietary restrictions set on them by the way that their body operates. Well, then that is your struggle and that is your fast, and that is something you discuss with your priest. So, are you allowing the heat and pressure of life, those obstacles, those challenges set upon us by external circumstances, to make you into a diamond rather than just sitting there like a lump of coal? Those obstacles will allow you to feel empathy with others in similar circumstances. I know that that is one lesson that I have learned along the way, that you don't hold on to struggles, that you share them with others. You're not meant to do this by yourself. You can serve in new ways you haven't before, even if it's just listening with empathy. Let me read this quote. A continuously happy life produces extremely unhappy circumstance. Excuse me, let me start over. A continuously happy life produces extremely unhappy consequences. In times of plenty, a man forgets himself, but in times of sorrows, he becomes more attentive to his salvation. That's from St. Ambrose of Obtuna, who lived in the early 1900s, just before the communist oppression of the church in Russia. So, how do we get through suffering? And I will give you one word answer. And very rarely do we ever have one word answers in life. And that one word is gratitude. Gratitude is possible in any circumstance. At a critical moment in my life, a priest told me to offer gratitude every morning and every night without fail. And it was the one discipline that saved me from despair. If the pain becomes impossible to stand and you cannot pray, hold your cross and cry. I have a small wood cross that I have a, in my prayer corner, and I would often unvelcro that from a wall and hold on to it and cry, and that's the only thing I could do. And that is the most valid prayer ever offered. But I've been there, sisters, in almost every form of suffering imaginable. The important task is to keep going. Just like the quote from Churchill, if you find yourself going through hell, keep going, because there is another side, and there's a finitude to it. Saint Nino was originally sent out on her missionary journey with 50 other young women. They were captured and tortured by a pagan prince. All her companions were martyred, and Nino was the only one to escape. She carried on alone towards Georgia. Stop and consider what a harrowing journey that was for a young woman on her own in a foreign land at the time. All she had with her was the grapevine cross from the Theotokos. And I have one here, and hopefully you'll be able to see it in my camera. I had requested my husband to go cut grapevine, and he bound it together with some linen thread. I don't have hair long enough now to, to bind a cross together. So you can imagine what she would clasp to her heart as she prayed. I think this would be a fantastic craft project if you would like to do this in the winter time. St. Nino's feast day is January 14th, and grapevines are often visible in the wintertime, especially as they are tangled in trees or shrubs in the woods. So maybe you can find a grapevine and cut some branches and have the scout in your family tie one up for you into a slightly drooping shape like this with the crossbar over the middle. So it's a good way to practice tying knots. And this has been your crafting commercial. Oh, and I should reiterate before I reach the end of my talk that I would like to engage with you. If you have any questions or comments, I'll hop back into Zoom, and so I can hear what you have to say as a panelist. Everything is preparation for what comes next. Everything in your life is preparation for what comes next. But you won't know until later what the circumstances you're in now mean. What I would like to say is that life experiences are like a compost heap. Now, I'm a gardener, and 2020 has been a great year to get outside and grow things because there hasn't been much else to do. And like any good gardener, we keep a compost bin in our backyard. So, one of the practices that I've adopted this year, as I empty the stainless steel bucket from our kitchen with the vegetable and fruit scraps, is I mentally put all my struggles in that bin as a prayer and I empty it into the heap and I just leave it out there. And ultimately, we want all of those things to rot down and decompose because all organic matter will eventually decompose. And then it becomes this amazing fertilizer for another generation of plants. And so nothing is wasted. Nothing is wasted. Our lives are meant to be organic in that way, that all suffering, that all obstacles and everything eventually bring life from it if we face them with humility and gentleness. Now, here's a quote that's carried me through some tough times. When you have nothing left to lose, all you have left is the truth. And that's from Stanley Hauerwas. Asceticism, suffering, the refining of fire that is life in 2020, all these things cleanse us of what holds us back. I would ask you to consider what you've lost this year that has helped you find truth in your life. What is most fundamentally important to you that you would grab and run out of a burning house? Not only physical things, but maybe the burning of expectations and hopes that you had had. What are you going to carry away from you? What can you carry on your own? Maybe we can treat this year like moving house. If you're anything like me, I've moved house a couple dozen times in my life. And this is the first time in my life that I have owned a house on my own and have lived somewhere with the eye of living here for many years to come. But the last time I moved, I went through a serious purge of all my personal possessions, and I wanted to make sure that what I brought into this new house and this new marriage and this new life would be life-giving to us. Because physically carrying things is labor, and if we can reduce that labor, it makes us light and simple. So, as we face the near future, still with many uncertainties about the pandemic and everything else, the new future is going to be a new home for all of us. It's not going to look the same. It's not going to be the normal we knew before. And I know that the quote new normal has been used quite often, but we're going to be shaped by this and we're going to build new things after this. So, and consider in times like this, we are taken back to the waters of baptism with our white robe, which symbolizes our freedom from sin in Christ. We've renounced Satan, and we continue to renounce Satan, the hold of the passions upon us, and accept healing through the sacraments. So, even though calendar pages are pretty arbitrary, let's set about making a new beginning. Even now, even before the pages flip by into 2021, I would encourage you to think about that. What are you carrying forward from this year? And to treasure that. Now, discernment takes time and it's a feedback loop. So let me explain how that goes. First, we hear a call. This can come in so many forms. For St. Nino, it was the Theotokos visiting her in the night. We still acknowledge visions and dreams as valid communication from God or from the saints. Though what happens most often, however, is like a person cornering you during coffee hour or sending you an email or text message. The church school director, Emily at St. Raphael's, asked me to teach middle school age girls. That was a calling. Though I don't think she knew it at the time, she was just trying to get a teacher to cover. I had never done that sort of teaching before in the Orthodox context. Was I intimidated? Absolutely. But I said yes. And I went in with an open mind. I asked what the girls' ideas were about what they would want to learn, besides the set curriculum that the school had. Because at that age, I think it's good to honor curiosity. And they told me they wanted to learn more about women's saints. I'm like, yes, that's a great idea. So I carried on to create a curriculum, sometimes by the seat of my pants, each week based on women's saints. Now, those nebulous ideas that we had at the beginning are for meeting needs. That is always the outward focus of what we do in life is for meeting the needs of others. And God will certainly honor this prayer. Lord, what would you have me to do to serve? And you will find yourself very busy in all the right ways. At some point during the church school year, as I'm going through week by week, teaching about all kinds of women's saints, including St. Nino, I thought, why don't I start writing these lessons down and publish them in a blog? Before I took on that venture, I knew I couldn't just start because being a public face and a public voice for the faith is is a very heavy proposition. So I went and asked my priest for his blessing. I didn't want to go rogue without oversight. It's important to have that covering and that encouragement and that sort of blessing before you start off. It is so easy to wreck ourselves with delusion. Look at me, look at what I'm doing. And it just puffs us up and builds a castle out of cotton candy that's not going to last. St. Nino, when she received her call from the Theotokos, immediately went to her uncle, who happened to be the Patriarch Juvenal of Jerusalem. She did not pack her bag first and then just jump on the nearest boat to sail off to the north. She was a very wise girl in that respect. She knew that she didn't want to be deluded. She knew she couldn't just go do whatever she wanted. She needed validation and confirmation that this was indeed from God. And you also need to accept the results of counsel. Now, what if my priest had told me, no, I don't think you should write and that you shouldn't publish this for the public? Well, then I didn't and I wouldn't because that's not I can't see myself the way that others see me, especially those who have pastoral oversight in your life. You can't see everything that you see. So you might have to wait, and oftentimes in life, that's the answer. And you might also get a no. And again, that can be very hard on the ego to accept. Humility is the fruit of that discernment process. It is the fruit of receiving counsel. It is recognizing that you are weak and that you are stronger only with oversight and with support. Now, here comes one of my favorite slides. The protection of the Mother of God. It's a very real thing and that I've experienced in my life. And again, as a Protestant who converted to the Orthodox faith, it took me a while to become acquainted with the Virgin. But I did through this process of discernment. And I made a very simple request of her. I asked her to protect and to guide me. Whenever I faced with a new and interesting idea or an avenue of action, that's what I would do. I would stop and ask her, just as I would have asked my mother here on earth. And she will care for you if you ask and respect her. Now, when I say respect, sometimes she will say no. I asked her for guidance and protection in many decisions, from finding a husband to finding a job or deciding to take up new projects. And she honors those requests in turn. And so I've had to respect her yes and no. What do those look like, though? How does that work? Usually, when I ask the Theotokos, should I do this thing or not, guide and protect me? If her answer is no, it will be a sudden turn of events. Something is canceled. A friend texts with concerning information that changes your mind. Usually, it's pretty swift in my experience when she says no. But if she says yes, you kind of have to keep looking back over your shoulder like a kid that is just learning to ride a bike without the training wheels. You have to look back and say, is this okay? Am I doing good? And sure enough, as you keep choosing to go forward, you keep having that freedom to go forward, and you'll know that it's her. Now, here comes the fun part with planning. You can plan all day long, and nothing will ever be perfect enough. I hate to break it to you, but it's true. I love planning. I love researching and collecting and hoarding precious things. I used to work as an archivist, so if that lets you any idea about how much I love planning and organizing things, I love putting old dusty things in boxes and writing numbers on them with a pencil, of course, not a pen. But at some point, I have to go do things. So there is that stop. There's that stop sign in life where, oh no, I have to move out into traffic now. So I can't just wait for life to be perfect. When you get the green light, you have to go towards obedience. But what if I don't know what the next right step to take is? Well, that's where that informed conscience comes from when we're working with the Holy Spirit. You look at your choices and you do the next best right thing that you see right in front of you. And that's all. That's all you have to do. You can't foresee every contingency the way God does. I mean, it's good to see a little bit. And that's why we have good rational minds on our shoulders usually. But you just have to begin sometimes. And then you start learning. Now, St. Nino had a mountaintop experience with God, and that's the introductory part of our chapter in the book and the story of St. Nino on the mountain. But it didn't end in glowy and transcendent peace, and that's typically how we discuss a mountaintop experience in our modern parlance. We think we go up on a mountain and we come down with the Ten Commandments and everything is good and right in the world. But Nino, growing up on the mountain, like many prophets before her, had a decisive moment where her obedience was a part of God intervening in a visible way for the Georgian people. And if you hadn't read that exciting introduction to the chapter, she had arrived in the capital of Georgia right when the people all streaming down to offer worship to pagan idols, including the king and queen. And upon witnessing this, and this is all, and you can compare this to Daniel in front of the worshipers. She screamed at them to tell them to stop worshiping. And then, can you just imagine that holy moxie? That kind of internal fortitude it would take to do that. But God backed her up, and He confirmed her screaming with wind and water and rain and storm that washed away the idols and that terrified the people into leaving their worship. But that action didn't convert the nation. It just merely stopped them from doing more harm to themselves in the moment. It was a wake-up call. But that's when Nino's real missionary work began. We sometimes wish for sudden results, and we wish that screaming at the top of our lungs would get those results, but it doesn't. But sometimes, every so often, you do get a mountaintop experience where you do have to yell and get visible and get in the way, where things have to happen. So stay the course, my friends. St. Nino lived in a small hut near the royal gardener with his wife. As they saw her live in holiness, they converted. 2 people, then a few more, then more miracles and healings brought more converts. St. Nino lived in her mission field for perhaps 20 years total. Our lives, if God is merciful, are long and full of time to accomplish what He has set out for us to do. Don't write off your work if it takes longer than you think, or impossible circumstances pop up. You know what the most fun things in the world are to do besides plan? Is projects. I have been a crafty person all my life. Sewing, knitting, baking, art, all kinds of things. Like I said, Pinterest was created just for me. I always have ongoing projects in various states. After completing one project, I bask in the light of such an accomplishment, and then I'm on to the next project. Callings, though, are not projects. There is not a beginning, a middle, or an end to a calling. You may do more of it at a time or less, but there will always be there. Projects can inhabit a calling, and that's often how you can see the fruits of your work is doing things with a beginning, a middle, and an end. For example, I've accepted the calling that I'm a writer. I love communicating through words. Participating in writing a book is a project, which has a beginning, middle, and end. And it's a wonderful ending because I get to talk to you about it. But going forward, I know I will always keep using my words to communicate truth and love until I die. And it might seem like a heavy thing, this word calling, but I would encourage you to wrestle with it because it's not as heavy as you think. It's not a rock like Marwana carried. It's it's a part of who you are. It's an identity. So before we come to our end of time together, I wanted to leave a few minutes for questions or comments. So again, I will hop off here and then join you back into Zoom. But before we start, I wanted to read this final quote. Your job is to work upon yourself. For this you are chosen. The rest is in the hands of God he who humbles himself shall be exalted. That's from St. Theophan the Recluse. And he said this in the context of making sure that we go forward in humility with whatever callings that God gives us. So I would like to open this up now to your questions and comments. So I will join you back in Zoom now.